Okay, guys, welcome to this new IEN Talks edition. Today we will have Jelle Millenaar. As you might know, he's a lead identity at the IOTA Foundation, and he's working on Selv. Today he's going to be presenting himself, and he's gonna do a demo as well. So, digital identity, decentralized digital identity, is a key feature of IOTA together with Streams. And many IEN members are waiting for this talk because they need these sort of solutions for their projects. So as usual, you can leave your questions for Jelle in the chat box at YouTube. And once he finishes with his presentation, I'm going to be doing the questions. We will have a little Q&A session. So that's it, Jelle, whenever you want.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for the great intro. As was said, my name is Jelle Millenaar, and today I will be presenting the Self app and also just making digital identity tangible. Um, Let me get the slides working. There we go. I'll be talking about the reason behind Self, why we have created this demo, and actually doing the demo live as well, if it goes well. I'll be discussing the potential for digital identity, some example narratives or stories that could be built on Self, and also what can you do potentially as an IEN member, as an IOTA community member, or someone that is running or part of a company. And obviously we end with a Q&A. So let's start with a little bit of theory of digital identity. Basically, every meetup I start from scratch because you never know what kind of background people have, and I go through this whole train of first explaining the problem, which is a lack of trust on the internet, and also lack of privacy on the internet. There's no real way we can safely share data online which we can actually trust from each other. It's very easy to pretend to be someone else or work for someone else or have some credentials that I don't really have. Now, the concept of self-sovereign identity is meant to solve that. It's also shortened to SSI, and really means taking control of your digital identity and being able to decide who you share your data with and how much data you share. We use certain standards for this, which are decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. The first being like your online account, and the second your information about you. A verifiable credential is a digital statement stating something about you, which is signed by a third party. So in short, I could take a diploma, for example. I've gone to university, so I got a diploma, and my university would be the third party digitally signing that diploma and then giving me control over that with my digital identity. So we then have this collaboration between three parties: the issuer, the holder, the verifier, which are the issuer being the university in this case, the holder being me, the student that got the diploma, and then the verifier is a party that I want to share my diploma with. And they can verify that information to be true by looking for the issuer signature. And then we have some very fancy cryptographic methods such as zero knowledge proof to make sure that as little information as possible is shared. But the conclusion is here that we have a lot of difficult terms to explain digital identity. There's a lot of theory, and we at the IOTA Foundation try to make that easier and more accessible by writing the white paper, The Case for a Unified Identity. This should bring you through this concept in about, I think, 14 pages, and it should be quite easy to follow, but it's still a long read. And it's just not the best way to really understand what digital identity is. Obviously, I've kind of rushed it in this very specific webinar, but normally speaking, you can probably fill a full webinar actually explaining all these concepts that I just did. And then at IOTA, we're actually really lucky because most digital identity implementations have to also explain to the user and to the company implementing digital identity what blockchain is. because they run digital identity on blockchain, you often have to pay fees, which require you to purchase a cryptocurrency. So you have to explain cryptocurrencies to them as well. They have to purchase these through an exchange, which gives a ramp up time of a couple of days for users to even be able to use your product. And pardon me, if a company decides to take on the fees for their users, that company still has to purchase cryptocurrencies to enable digital identity for their use case. And that means you also have to explain the fee economy or the fee market associated with a blockchain. It can differ from day to day, right? So it's very important that companies understand that when they purchase these cryptocurrencies to use this product, they know what they're getting into and they know how to handle that with their tax filings as well. So this is something where we definitely have an edge as IOTA. IOTA is just a technology which runs completely in the background. If you use Selv, which is what the rest of the talk will be about, you have absolutely no idea that it's being run on IOTA. And there might be other demos out there that give the same user experience. You have no idea that it's running on Ethereum, but that's often because it uses a testnet, and a testnet doesn't have fees, which in my eyes is kind of cheating because it's not how the real product would work. So the idea here is that with IOTA, you have a lot less to explain to your user about how to use this technology. You still have these more difficult concepts around digital identity, but they come a lot more natural than just all the blockchain knowledge and fee market that basically nobody can really predict and understand. So the first thing we've been doing is really put that theory into a very nice narrative or an experience that you can have. And I highly recommend that everyone who hasn't done that yet, who is attending this webinar, to definitely check it out. It's on self.iota.org. It is a website and at the same time an app that you have to download. And it will basically walk you through the experience of a problem that we have in the current world with the pandemic going on. If you don't have time for that and afterwards you still want to see a summary of what it is meant to do, we also have a very nice video, which you can find on the IOTA Foundation's YouTube channel or on our new website. But as I'm going to explain further in the webinar, this narrative, this experience that we've made is actually perfectly made for these kind of meetups, these kind of webinars. And so we're actually going to experience it ourselves as well. We're just going to do the demo. If everything went well, I should have everything connected up nicely. So we open that and we put this here. So what you now have on the screen is our Selv website and and my phone at the moment with the Selv app open. So both screens actually show just a very basic overview of what we're going to do, what it's explaining, how digital identity works, and some promises on the app side. So Selv is meant to store your personal credentials and you take personal charge over it. Pardon the quality, by the way, this is what happens if you try to use free software. So it explains also that it's your data, your ownership, so you also have a responsibility, but also have increased privacy in general. And yeah, you control the data yourself. So let's actually dive into the narrative now. So here on this main screen, we get welcome to Selv. And it's basically a narrative where we are in this world with Corona being a problem, and you want to return to your normal life, to work. And what we want to do is be able to prove that we are actually fit and we're healthy, and therefore we're able to go to work, cross the border, and those kind of things. So we start the experience. It explains a lot. I'm not going to walk through all of that. That is something that you have to experience yourself. But we're just going to start the demo. Asks you to download the app, which I've done. And we have this nice to-do list on the right side, which shows our progress through the narrative. So we're going to collect our health certificate as first stage to prove that I'm actually healthy. So this means I had to do a test in real life, and the test has been stored somewhere at a specific health authority. And we're now going to log in to that health authority's website to retrieve our health credentials. And logging in is actually a lot easier with Selv as well, because you don't really need to create an account because we already have our digital identity account. So let's actually create that. So let's just create an account. What is now happening is actually it's doing a transaction to IOTA to create my digital identity. And obviously it fails when you're trying to test that. I believe this might resolve it, right? Always put a 1 behind your name. No, it doesn't. Excellent. There we go. Flawlessly worked out. So I have now created my own digital identity. Normally it should just work on your first try, but that is what Murphy Law is for you if you test anything in a live stream. And we actually, not sure what happened there. I'm going to scan the code now from my phone. I have to switch between screens a little bit to show what is going on. So I have to allow a few things on my phone. Then I can scan the QR code. And it now asks me, do you want to share your credential? And this is basically, I share my identity to prove who I am to the National Health Authority. And then the health authority is actually able to identify me and therefore only show my actual test results. I think, yeah, all right. So what happens next is that I want to download my health credential. Actually, let's be a little bit smarter about this, but only a little bit. So there we go. Now we should see it at the same time. So I asked to add the credential to the Selv app. Excellent. I think it already popped up before. Download health credential. All right, great. Obviously, it's not now working. Not sure what I did wrong there. Maybe some of you actually tried to scan the QR code before me, which would be very awesome if you did that. All right, well, I'm just going to keep it here because I don't want to dwindle too much on this. So in general, the experience is that you download your credential and you're able to prove that you're healthy to a border authority giving you a visa to travel internationally, and also to your work to be able to go back to work. And the experience is just as simple as we have been doing so far. You scan a QR code, receive some information, and then you can share that information again to another authority by first scanning a QR code to establish a connection, and then you give permission to share your data. So definitely check it out yourself if you haven't already. And the demo should definitely work at home. If it doesn't, that's something we'll have to work on for another time. Let me return back to my slides. The point is, as well from Selv, is that this is just a single narrative. And that is not something we haven't explained very well with the initial release of Selv. We don't want to stick to this one narrative of Corona being the only use case for digital identity. There are a lot more, so we'll get into that. But the improvements that we're adding towards the current situation with Self is that if you compare it to any paper documents, they are easily misplaced or damaged, while a phone is generally well kept by people. And if you look at forgeries and copies of physical documents, that's obviously not as difficult. While with Self, these digital documents are all digitally signed, and therefore are you can't change your information, and it's verifiable in that manner. So it can't be forged. Paper credentials must be shared within close proximity. Paper itself can obviously also possibly transmit diseases such as corona. And that is something that with the digital credential you can do on a distance, hopefully preventing the spread of corona. So that is a little bit the reasoning behind this very specific use case. And you can see how it is really relevant in the world right now, which is one of the main reasons why we have built this specific narrative. But the main goal of Self was really to make digital identity tangible. I wrote tangle, okay. That's just a force of habit, I guess. But this is a really nice quote that I have to like to put out. It's from Hello IOTA. If you don't know them, they are an awesome small community running a website and a YouTube channel with articles about the latest IOTA news, making it very easy to digest the content of IOTA. So definitely look them up if you haven't already. But they wrote a small article about the demo, and Winston, one of the writers from Hello IOTA, said, I have to admit that the concept of DID is nebulous, and when I'm constantly inundated with buzzwords and tech jargon, as I've shown in slide 1, having the first-hand experience of actually using an app is unbelievably eye-opening in a way only experience can be. It makes the idea of digital identity tangible, hence where I've stolen the title from. So yeah, you can read as many articles and white papers and executive summaries as you like, but you never get the understanding that you will from interacting with an application like this. And this was really the point of Self, to really just experience what digital identity can do and how it can affect your life as a person, but also how it can affect companies' businesses. And obviously, we haven't necessarily done that yet with this narrative, but we'll get there. So the potential of digital identity. So with Self, we created a demonstration platform. So that means that you can experience how digital identity is going to be used, and really hopefully kind of gain a peek into the future of how the world might look like with digital identity. It should be very easy to understand, and it should be a standalone explanation of everything that it does. So during the Phil demo, I guess, that I was doing, you saw quite a few slides or parts of the demo which explain stuff to the user. This is all to really explain what is going on in the background and the added benefits that the experience should bring. And therefore, if you now do this demo alone and you don't fill the demo, you'll be able to really understand what is going on without having someone from the IOTA Foundation explaining it to you. We are working towards creating a selection of narratives. So these are the different stories and use cases that digital identity can enable. And hopefully that will broaden your horizon of what can digital identity accomplish, that you can start to understand the advantages that it will bring and what it can do. And Self itself is definitely made with privacy by design. And we are more and more confident in saying that we're GDPR compliant. Obviously, that's a law interpretation, and even lawyers can discuss about that. But with this very specific narrative, we had Dentons, one of the larger firms in the world, actually look at our privacy the way we took on privacy and GDPR compliance, even on IOTA. And we passed that with flying colors. So we're very happy to say that we're very confident in being GDPR compliant. So these narratives generally have a very generic walk through with very different use cases. So at the start, you saw me create a digital identity, which is a one-time experience that you should have. You only create an account once, and afterwards you should be set and you should be able to use that account. You don't necessarily have to use Selv for this. We're happy to work with other identity wallets that might implement the IOTA protocol on there. There are a lot of interoperable identity wallets. One of them, for example, is Slush, who is a new Tango EE partner. And they will be implementing the IOTA protocol as well into their identity wallet, being the first interoperable wallet to also implement IOTA. And that should also allow you to use the Slush app to go through these narratives as well. Once you've created an account, you can grow your account by gathering credentials. So with the demo, you'd be able to pick up a credential for your health, for the test that you've done, but also a visa credential that has been given to you to travel internationally. You can then share this with whomever you want and how much information you want. This is a very important point of Selv. We're not locking up data in your phone. That's not the point of it. We just want to put people back in control of their data and then still be able to share it. And then it's up to the companies and governments to also start accepting this data, because obviously the world is not even digitized yet. A lot of organizations and governments still use paper-based documents for a lot of processes. So first they need to digitize, and then we're going to go towards verifiable credentials. But definitely the most innovative ones we can push towards accepting these verifiable credentials. And when more and more start doing this, you really get the adoption going that we want in the end. And that is what we really try to achieve with Selv, is prepare for mass adoption, make it as easy as possible to understand. So what are the benefits of digital identity? For users, it's obviously really taking back control, control over your data, control over who sees that data. Because you can control who sees the data, you are in control of your own privacy. Your data shouldn't be sitting in a central server which gets hacked and you had no control over that data and it's still out there in the wild. So it should be really back into your hands. And also reusability. It becomes a lot easier if you have gotten your personal information in the form of a verifiable credential on your phone. And you can just scan a QR code to share the data, and that's it. You don't have to type it in every time. So think about the amount of times you have to even create an account online and then fill in your shipping information if you're buying anything that you want to get shipped, or how often you have to type in your telephone number, your email address. It would be way easier if you can just give permission for that data. So it's also just reusability and just a user experience improvement, especially if you start talking about KYC. If I want to sign up to 5 different exchanges to purchase cryptocurrencies, I would have to do KYC 5 times individually. However, if I had it reusably, I would do it once. Someone would identify me, and I can reuse that KYC to potentially sign up to the other exchanges, giving me immediately access to their platform. So for businesses, there are also actually a lot of advantages. The privacy laws actually make it very hard for companies to even store data. They often don't really want to store data about their customers anymore because they get data responsibility. They have to prove that they need that data, and they have to really secure that data and make sure that they delete it on request. And it's a very hard setup to do this. And with GDPR, that has become a lot more surfaced, that problem. And with Selv, we can go towards a world where you can share access to your data to a company. Once they use the data, they can immediately throw it away. And then if they need it ever again, they can re-request it with you or query it from a specific access point where you have stored your data. You have given them access to. What happens then is that they don't necessarily have to store your data, so they don't have to protect it either. And there's just many advantages for this. It's a win-win situation. And as I explained before, the user experience is actually a lot easier as well because, for example, ramp up time of account creation, filling in the data, doing a KYC, all that stuff can be instantly reused, and therefore you could sign up for any service basically instantly. At the start of the presentation, I explained that you don't necessarily have to understand the Tangle to understand and be able to use Self. But still, I'm going to briefly show the differences between the setups. So you basically have a lot of centralized identity providers right now, which store a lot of your information, and yeah, they're prone for attacks. It's very easy to target them. As a hacker, you just know that they have a lot of personal information, and they have to protect that very well. But at the same time, if you want one single identity system across the world, that means that a lot of companies and governments need to start collaborating on implementing the same identity system. And yeah, we make that a lot easier with a permissionless system where you can just implement the open standard and just take part without asking any permission, paying any fees or anything like that. So then, yeah, you had the blockchain infrastructure to host the first digital identity implementations. And I've already shown the disadvantages of that or mentioned those. So with the Tangle, it's completely free to use. So you don't need to use tokens, don't pay any fees. And it's more scalable due to the more parallel approach instead of sequential approach that we have taken against blockchain. All right, so let's dive into some example narratives. The idea here is that, like I said before, we want a selection of narratives. And we would like to preferably build those in collaboration with organizations that are interested in experimenting on these specific narratives. So for people, for example, one of the most requested narrative that we got is a reusable Know Your Customer. I've already briefly explained it. It takes a lot less effort to enroll someone to a new service if they already have done a Know Your Customer process beforehand. So you could basically, with one click of a button, open up a bank account or get an insurance or something like that, as long as the KYC is trusted by the verifying party, in this case, where you want to open up an account. So in order to make the KYC as trusted as possible, you would probably have to collaborate with preferably governments to make sure that you can use the digital identity infrastructure that lots of governments have created. But also you can use other banks or other strong identity providers for this KYC. Another important one is really a passwordless internet. I've basically already shown that in the demo as well. You don't have to create an account if you have an identifier which you can prove ownership of. That's what you do with scanning the QR code. You basically sign something with your Self app which states I'm in control of the private key associated to this digital account. And that signature changes every time because where you log in challenges you. It challenges you to something that you have to sign, and that changes every time. So therefore, basically the website knows who you really are and that you are in control of that account. And that is the exact purpose of a password. It is to prove that you are the one who's supposed to have access to this account. So instead of having 130 different accounts with 130 different passwords, as we all have to do, of course, and we have to generate new ones every 2 weeks because obviously everyone follows these rules. Life becomes slightly easier as Self app can take care of all of that by just signing challenges. There are lots of other use cases focused on people, such as the certifications, diplomas, receipts when you buy something that allows you to return a purchase that you did to, for example, any branch in the store, branch of stores, stores in the branch, because they can verify which store signed the receipt and even the age of the receipt. And if you hold these digitally on your phone, people don't lose them as often as quite a few of us do. Prescriptions, tickets, you name it, everything like this, when it is digitized, becomes a lot easier to manage for people and a lot more trustworthy for companies to accept. Organizations themselves directly benefit from it as well. They can have a verifiable company registration. They can have a proof of employment for all their employees. And this really counteracts fraud, where someone pretends to be a worker from your company. And you can even add some extra privileges like this, like giving access control to only your employees to enter a building. So you scan your Selv app to gain access through a gate. You can sign invoices with them, making sure that you don't pay an invoice from a random company that is just sending false invoices, which is, by the way, worked. Someone actually scammed, I believe, a few companies out of a couple of million by just sending invoices for absolutely nothing, and they paid them. That's not advice, though. Don't do that. So yeah, these examples that I'm now going through, these could all very well be narratives built on Selv, and we can experiment with them and show the different user experience that you would have. So with access control for people that are working in your building, the difference experience would be that they don't have to carry around the pass anymore, and they can use the Selv app to go through the gate. The question is, though, how well does that work? Are there any delays? This is something that we have to experiment together on by creating such a narrative. And the same for devices. Identity for devices or things is also a very, very important part of digital identity on IOTA, even though it's slightly harder to demo with Selv, as it is quite focused on more human-based use cases. But things you can look into is a proof of authenticity, that a device, machine, or even an object, as long as it's as an RFID or a QR code possibly, it can prove who has created that device, maybe what kind of properties it has. And we could scan that with the Selv app to really verify the information about that device. So you know when you're purchasing a device that is actually not a knockoff. So it really protects the brand. You can start to trust data from IoT sensors that are registered and created by a known manufacturer by you. That makes a lot of sense if you really want to start creating a smart city. You want to respond to live data, but you have to trust that data. So you would like to trust the sensors that you're reading the data from as well. This too can be interacted with a narrative on Selv, as you could, for example, collect data from a sensor on a specific server in control of the sensor itself or the owner of the sensor, and you can give access to that data as well by potentially selling access or showing access through Selv. And that gives a very nice experience where we don't have to push all the data through the tangle to prove who's the owner of the data, but you have this access control mechanism and a signature which is coming from the IoT device directly when sending out the data to make sure that it is all authentic and coming from the same sensor. So there's just a lot of things that we can experiment on. Another one, vehicle identity. So if you purchase a vehicle secondhand, you could see what happened to it, when was the last repairs, what is its current range of its battery, all kinds of things like that. So we're coming closer to the end of the webinar, and the last question is really, what can you do? So for the individuals out there, they're just these are demos that we're creating with Selv. Obviously, they're not meant to be used in production just yet. The IOTA stack in terms of digital identity is not mature enough for that just yet, but it doesn't mean that I have to take very long. But you can learn from these demos. Definitely do them yourself. Go to self.iota.org to do that. And it's a demo platform. So demo it, just like I tried to do today. Hopefully you have a lot more success. Just show it to people to explain, hey, this is what IOTA can do. This is what digital identity can do. And it's perfect for meetups like this, or more physical meetups when we go back to a post-pandemic age. And yeah, you can just show people directly how it's supposed to work. Show your boss and colleagues, like they might be interested in what digital identity can do to the business where you work at. That can be fun, right? Obviously, this comes close to shilling, so please just be cool about it and just only show people that have an interest in it, or that you know very well. But yeah, just use your own head for that. So in terms for companies, yeah, digital identity, like I've shown, is a very broad subject. There's just a lot of different use cases that I haven't mentioned, and just let's explore them together. Let's explore. You can explore it with the IOTA Foundation, then contact us. But you can also start experimenting with the technology yourself. Ask people within the IOTA community, or yeah, look at the open source code as soon as it is open sourced, which shouldn't take too long. For the IT consultants out there, feel free to show Self to clients. This can be interesting for them to know, hey, how can digital identity be interesting for them? And yeah, definitely come to us to request your own narratives. If you experiment now, you get ahead. You are ahead of the curve. You get a competitive advantage, we hope, when digital identity becomes more mainstream. And yeah, 2020 is really the year for experimenting with digital identity. As with the IOTA stack, we really would like to build towards real use cases that are implemented in production. But that's the IOTA stack. With digital identity, we're slightly catching up, so we're more in an experimental phase. But if you are interested or excited about digital identity in your organization, and you want to basically, yeah, show your bosses and colleagues what it can do, this is a really experience for a show don't tell. As I've said, it's very hard to explain digital identity, but by experiencing it very quickly, they should get it within 15 minutes, and they should have an interest in this if all goes well. And as a company, you can gain a very innovative reputation, of course, if you start experimenting with these newer technologies while they're still yeah, cutting edge. And that can always be a benefit for you as a company. So that is it from my end. I believe we're going to do a Q&A now by our host, but this is the information that you can use to contact me. Definitely feel free to reach out.
Wait,
Thank you, everyone.
Let's share Jelle social media. Okay, great presentation, Jelle. Thanks a lot. I don't know what happened with the demo. Probably someone scanned the thing before you did.
Yeah. So good on them for taking that immediately. Yeah.
Okay, so we do have questions, and actually we have a lot of questions. So let's go straight to the first one. The first one is from Dennis Shelton. I think I know this guy. Dennis is asking if Selv is using MAM or streams.
It is currently using MAM, as in the old version of streams. This is done because the digital identity implementation we're using is actually now a half-year old. It's reusing the industry marketplace code base in a way, Identity TS. We actually would like to move away from MAM or streams. We're still designing if we want an IOTA streams implementation or specific digital identity transactions on IOTA. And that really depends on the the question, do we need an encryption layer for this, which is some overhead that I prefer to remove, as in the encryption and decryption. But we're still in talks with Dentons to see if that encryption layer has an effect for the GDPR compliance of the implementation.
Okay, so Dennis is also asking something that you just referred to. Is there a document from the lawyer firms stating GDPR compliance?
So the hackathon that we did, the Global Legal Hackathon, where we collaborated with Dentons, the resources that you can find on there are created together. So therefore, basically, how do you say that? Both parties agree that on the content of that information, and it also states that there's GDPR compliance, as you can find in the slides, I believe, and the website. So that is kind of the proof, if you want. But we might be working more together with them to tackle this question more, and they will definitely be involved and put their names under that as well. So I hope that is enough for you.
Okay, Dennis. So next one is from Mike Bennett. Are there any plans to use disposable context-specific digital identities?
Yes. Overall, there's to quickly explain, disposable identities, or PRD IDs, are identities that you create for a single interaction and you don't reuse them. In terms of GDPR compliance, they are very easy to make GDPR compliant because you don't have to upload anything to IOTA as a person, and that doesn't hold up for organizations. They can just upload it because they don't have any GDPR issues. So that is basically the very easy way to be GDPR compliant. And if that turns out to be the only way, that will be our way forward. But personally, I'm mostly a fan of going for a global identity that I use and reuse for multiple interactions, because it makes my life a lot easier to not have to think about these kind of things. If there's correlation between identities, etc., it just works. But we'll have to see how it goes. This is one of those things we have to experiment with, and we hope to do that as we do more narratives.
Okay, so well, you just mentioned the global identity, and Gabriela is asking, how do you see the integration of these sort of solutions from governments? Are there any countries using digital identity?
So at the moment, it's very hard to connect a government identity to a digital identity, because if I take the Netherlands, for example, we have a very cool identity system, which is called DigiD. And I can log in, and then the government knows it's me, and I can use it for all my government related online accounts. If I would do that login, and a identity provider observes that, they could sign a verifiable credential which states, I have seen this user log in into this specific digital identity of the Dutch government. Therefore, I know he is a Dutch citizen, and potentially can sign some data like my name, etc. with it. So this is basically the permissionless way to make use of those government systems without involving the government directly. But it would be even better if we can get the governments to agree to, when you log in to this DigiD system, that they sign themselves that you have done this. So they become the identity provider. That is something that is more tricky and requires government adoption, which is currently either not happening or only on an experimental basis or with very local use cases. But it is definitely something that we as an IOTA Foundation are focusing on, because we believe that connecting to the European and probably worldwide e-identity systems of the governments is going to hugely enable digital identity. So we're definitely making that a high priority for us.
Okay. Wow, we have a lot of questions, man. I don't know. I'm gonna try
That's
to be
good.
fair with everyone, but probably if you guys posted more than one, probably we won't be able to cover both. I don't know. Let's see. So next one is from Robert Hester. what is required of the credential issuers to use them? I don't know if this is clear. Do you
Yeah,
understand this?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely
What
do.
is required? Okay.
So at the moment, Self is a demonstration. So if you basically, if we want to do a narrative, we have to come in contact with the issuer in that case of the credential to integrate them into Self. But obviously we want to go to a world where everything is permissionless and we go to production, and in this case an issuer would have to implement the digital identity stack into their own systems to support giving out credentials. One of the goals that we have as the IOTA Foundation, and definitely that we see reflected in the IOTA community, is that there's probably going to be an open source software package for companies to use to start giving out credentials like this. So we're all focusing on making this adoption as easy as possible. And if they can just download a piece of software and therefore integrate it into their system, and it's open sourced, so they can do their own security audits and everything, we make it a lot easier for them to join the ecosystem. So that's our goal. That's definitely not how it's looking right now, but those are basically 2021 goals for us.
Okay. So the next one from Ivan Bakalov. I think this is good because it is good to explain how this works. So how can it be? How can I probably be insured? Uh, can I access my identity independently from a device? For instance, if he loses his phone.
This is a good question. If I have a meetup where this question is not asked, I'm disappointed, because obviously this is a very logical concern. If I put everything on my phone and I make it super important, then obviously I need to have a fallback. So ways you can do this is what we have thought about so far. You have a very decentralized version, which can be also very difficult to do. I could split up my digital identity basically in small pieces that in themselves mean nothing, and split them across different self instances of friends and family that I trust with them. So if I ever lose my phone, I'll be able to take back those separate pieces, recombine them, decrypt them, probably using a password, and then you have restored your identity. An easier version is to just have a backup in the cloud or a separate cold storage device or something like that, which allows you to restore your identity. This is definitely a field of research that needs to be done, and it's currently also not supported in the Self app right now. If someone wants to do a specific narrative around that, then definitely reach out. But I believe that this is something which is important for a production system, but not necessarily for a demo system.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So following question from Das van Sandbeck. What will be the low-hanging fruit? The first applications that will lead to this being practically implemented and becoming normal fast. I can imagine caution for very sensitive applications.
Yeah, I think with my experience with talking to our partners in the IOTA ecosystem, and even outside of that, you really see that the KYC is definitely the most requested part of digital identity. They see a lot of advantages to that. So companies would be very happy to implement that. And at the same time, the identity providers, either that being governments, banks, or whoever signs the first KYC, they actually have a business model opportunity to implement that. So it's definitely a win-win. And if that happens, it's a very broadly usable application, which you could reuse for signing up to banks, insurances, exchanges in the case for cryptocurrencies, and a lot more things. So that might be one way that we reach. That we reach mass adoption in no time.
Okay. So Dennis returns with he's asking, is self using anti-RU?
It is not. However, Self built on the standard for DID and verifiable credentials, which has a agnostic implementation for your cryptographic encryption schemes. That's what NTRU is, by the way, for those who are unfamiliar. So that could be implemented, and there would be absolutely no problem to implement that into Selv and possibly allow people to choose, or most people won't care probably. So we, as the app developer, could give them a hint on which one to use. But yeah, there's no problems in doing this, besides I believe some patent problems around that, but that's not specifically our concern.
Okay, so let's go with this one from Sarang Parnekar. Gosh, probably I pronounced it that the wrong way. So the proof of work for each DID in the tangle with current MWM will be surely costly as the status of each participant changes. Will there be a tangle where a minimum weight magnitude will be lowered and given to such forks?
So there's nothing stopping people from just rolling a private tango or something like that to prevent this issue. The Selv demo actually currently runs on the DevNet because of this problem. Account creation took, I believe, 8 seconds on average on the main net, and on the DevNet about like 2 or 3 seconds. And because this is all meant to be a very nice user experience, we have decided to go for DevNet for basically the exact reason that you're stating. However, it only uploads the DID documents to IOTA right now. And that is also the purpose of how we're going to continue doing this. So all the verifiable credentials that you gather have absolutely zero interaction with IOTA. IOTA is purely the trust layer for the DIDs. And it turns out that you don't actually have to update DID documents frequently. You could create a DID document once as a person, and if you never lose keys, or if you never want to rotate your private key, which is inadvisable, but let's say you do, then you would never actually have to update the DID document again. So there's not many transactions required. For example, assuming that the Tango has the throughput that we're experiencing with ComNet now with the Hornet update, you could probably give identities to every single citizen in Europe, probably within a day or something of spamming transactions. And then you're done for the entirety of Europe. And obviously, we're not going to get adoption of the entirety of Europe in a single day. So that should be fine. So I don't actually think it will be a problem, and it won't be necessary to lower proof of work. I honestly am not entirely convinced we need the scalability beyond that, what we're seeing with Hornet right now, except as if we go in towards identity for things, which is when scalability becomes more interesting again, as there's going to be a lot more identities out there. But the Hornet update will definitely give us a lot of room to work with in terms of throughput required from the network.
Okay, so let's do this one from Buzz, and probably one more, and then we are done, okay? Let's try to keep it under 1 hour. So Buzz is asking, I am assuming this is not dependent on core size, so when, this is a when question, after chrysalis, first phase or second phase, can the coordinator mess this up? Yeah, the coordinator can mess everything up.
Well, no, not necessarily here, because we're talking about data transactions, and the coordinator is only really relevant for value transactions, especially once we go with the white flag approach, where transactions can be confirmed regardless of their location. I don't see the coordinator screwing this up. So no, it's not dependent on Corticide. It's not necessarily dependent on Chrysalis either. The coming updates are enough. However, there's a large stack of digital identity libraries that need to be made to be production ready, that need to be security audited, that we need to have specific software on top of it, as was the question before. How are issuers going to handle this? So there's just lots of work to do. And that takes time. We hope to have our first components to be production ready by the end of this year, but that's very bare bones. But 2021 will definitely see a ramp up of what is what you can use for digital identity in a production-ready environment.
Okay. So I have one last question, but you sort of talked about this just on your last comments. I don't know if you want to add something here.
Well, definitely what I said before, that we need adoption, and for that we need a lot of coding to be done, a lot of the stack to be ready. But until that time, what we're doing right now with Self, and what I definitely hope that also the IEN members will continue for me as well, is educating. Educating is now very important. Show companies what Self can do, what digital identity can do, and that's how we can reach mass adoption as soon as possible, as soon as we actually have everything production ready, or not necessarily everything. We have a decent amount of software ready to be used in production. So I'm not sure what else to add to there. I can't keep saying 2021 more, I guess. So yeah, keep in mind that adoption will take more than a year as well, but that's when we're ready to start pushing for adoption.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so that's it, Jelle. Thanks a lot for being here today, for dedicating some time to this presentation, and especially to answer questions. And of course, thanks a lot to everyone who joined in. Guys, take care. See you on next IEN Talk. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks, guys.